Recording in progress.
So if anyone is unmuted, if you could mute them, that would be great. Just so I can start. A second to sign in.
I'd rather not do minutes today because I haven't done the last minutes yet. So,
Hey, can we impose
Wow.
one set of minutes?
Try it.
Because I haven't done mine yet from last time.
yeah.
Previous time.
Okay.
You don't want to fall behind.
I think everyone's in. We're gonna get going. Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Chuck Tironi, Reading's Conservation Administrator. This meeting will be conducted in person and remote format consistent with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, which further extend the COVID-19 measures regarding remote participation in public meeting until March 31st, 2025. Please note that all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permissible by law. This agenda includes those matters that can be reasonably anticipated to be discussed at this meeting. Please note, this meeting is being recorded. All material for this meeting is available on the town conservation website. I will provide a link in the chat when we get this meeting going. And Brian Bowe is the Conservation Commission Chair and will facilitate this meeting. Please note there will be a public comment period at the end of each hearing. Each vote will be taken during this meeting will be conducted by roll call, and we'll begin with roll call attendance. Brian, can you please review the agenda and take the roll call attendance?
Okay. First, I'll do the roll call. We'll start with Walter.
Walter Talbot, member present.
Tony,
Tony Rodolakis, member present.
Martha,
Martha Moore, Vice Chair, present.
Brian Bowe, Chair, present. Now for review of the agenda. We'll start tonight with a working session concerning the Center for Active Living and Pickleball Projects at Simons Way. Then we'll move on to 0 Vine Street, MBTA. That's a continuation of a hearing. But when we get there, that will be continued. There'll still be a short comment period. And that's it for hearings. Then we move into old new business. Then some discussion items. And that's pretty much it for tonight. So having said that, we want to go to the first item, and I know Jane, you're going to present.
Before Jane starts, so Jenna, I let you in the meeting. Can you just let me know who else is on your team, and I'll let them in the meeting also.
Sure. So it
I
looks
know
like,
Activitas is here.
yep, Joel Bargman is here from BH+A. Brian Hermodka is here from TTH, Turner Townsend and Heary. It looks like we have Michael Coltman also here. He is the Reading Pickleball Association president. And I do see maybe a couple people in the waiting room, but I am not sure who they are. So it looks like everyone from my team is here. So thank you.
You said Jim Bargman? Joel, okay.
Yep. Oh, and it looks like we also have Dan Chen, who's also from BH+A.
Sure, got, yep, okay.
Can you put it on gallery view?
Up there, yeah. So this broke, this is new, and I'm yeah.
Okay.
So let's see.
It's his first day with new
Yeah,
hearings.
yeah.
I feel that.
All right, we'll go back to this. Gallery view.
For the folks at home, we're just trying, all we can see is the camera in the room and Mr. Talbot.
So this
We're
is
trying to make
gallery
it so
right
we-
here.
That's gallery. Oh, because it's only showing if they don't have their camera. If they have the camera
guess- I
on, we
guess
can
so.
see you. If your
Yeah.
camera's off, we can't see you. There's Dan.
Yeah, there you go.
There we
Thanks.
go. I actually wasn't allowed to turn on my camera before, so.
Oh, okay. Okay, so from Activitas, we have Steve Christopoli today. So I'm Jane Wellman. I'm the Assistant Town Manager. It is my sincere pleasure to be with you tonight. Chuck Tyrone has been just outstanding in helping to work with this project. Multiple times we've called him, we've had meetings with him, interdepartmental meetings to kind of gauge what does the commission want to see. And so we've asked for this working session this evening to draw you through both projects as it refers to the wetlands over on Simon's Way. Both projects, so there were, during the feasibility study of the project, our architect Joel Bargman with BH&A identified that pickleball might be an effective use at this location. Through that process, the pickleball community requested that because they're doing their own fundraising and because there was previously a plan to have pickleball courts at our Birch Meadow project during phase 2, but that was taken out due to noise considerations. And the pickleball community was very amenable to that. There are a number of reasons the projects were split. But the civil engineer, which is Activitas, has been retained to do both projects. And Joel is the designer for both projects. So we have a great team, they're working together, and I'm not going to belabor this, but they have just an outstanding group of people. We will take you through a presentation that shows you sort of the iterations to the design. So you will see how it's changed over time in consideration and in partnership with Chuck. We welcome all questions, and I think we're very encouraged to begin. Jenna, is there anything further that you'd like to add that I didn't mention?
No, wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, so I think the person to turn it over to is probably Steve, unless it's Joel. Joel, it's Joel. Nope, it's Steve. There we go. Okay, you're on. Can they unmute?
Yep, sorry about that.
Okay.
Good evening, members of the commission. Thank you for having us for this working session. I'm Steve Crisafulli with Activitas, landscape architect. Joel is with us from BH+A. Joel, feel free to jump in. I don't know if you want to introduce the project as a whole. I mean,
Sure.
And I can walk through the site.
Sure. The project consists of a community center with a focus on senior center component. It's about a 28,000 square foot building on 2 stories. In addition to the senior components, which are in large part multi-use in that when the seniors aren't using them, they're available for a recreation department or other uses. There's also a gym and a walking track as part of the project. The project has a parking requirement that has been thought through very carefully to not overbuild the parking lot. We can talk about that if you have an interest. We've also worked with the Burbank Arena to get a preliminary discussion going on shared parking when there may be a very large event at the community center. The Recal project, they may be able to use the lot in front of Burbank, and vice versa. When Burbank has a large event, they may be able to use the lot. And that's been able to contribute to right sizing the parking lot for this Recal project. And just before Steve starts, the reason we identified this for pickleball is that there's a end of the site that's fronts on the back side of Burbank Arena, which is the only other building within any locus of the pickleball area. So it's an area that doesn't have any noise issues for abutters, neighbors. The Recal building is sufficiently far away. And as mentioned, we're at the backside of Burbank. There are no openings or anything to disturb. So it's an ideal location for this particular program, which you may know is hard to cite correctly. So Steve, thank you.
So I'm just going to run through existing conditions quick. And then as Jane mentioned, just go through kind of the iterations that we've been through over the last month or so. So obviously Burbank Arena, center of the screen. The site south of that is obviously very vegetated. This is a zoomed out version of the 2 parcels that the town purchased in 2022. The area we're focused on is that first parcel up above. The wetland cuts through pretty much the entire back and left side of that site. Some shots going down the road of the area where we would be clearing for the recal building and the pickleball courts. Right now, again, it's vegetated. It looks like it was a dumping ground for some of the materials. Pretty much it. There's not much more to talk about on the existing conditions. We are currently getting the survey updated, the flags re-delineated, and we should have that middle of February. So for the conceptual master plan, this was an early iteration. Building location hasn't really changed. The pickleball courts, we were showing 8 originally with some parking off of Range Road. The intent is that the town will utilize their easement, and whether or not it's a retaking of the road or that's still in discussion, but the goal is that this road will be widened to an official road. So originally we looked at some parking off of that and then an option for some additional overflow parking or alternate parking. Ideally, it's not preferred to come 90 degrees off of a road. So as we kept looking through and working with the pickleball group on their wishes for the pickleball facility, the next iteration was slightly larger courts, a little bit more room. What we originally showed were kind of the minimum sized, and in lieu of head-in parking, this was kind of following that conversation with the arena folks about utilizing the back part of that parking lot. So we figured if we can kind of pull some of that parking away and push it to the back of the arena, we can put some spots up front, get a little bit further, and increase those court sizes. The parking lot and the building, the only real change was after meeting with public safety, some things that they brought up. Again, this is schematic design, so it's pretty early. We didn't have dumpster locations identified and a few other things. So we've added the fire lane, and as I go through, there's another slide on fire access, and we're showing the dumpsters in the lower part of the parking lot. The next iteration pushed all the pickleball parking in the back of the arena. This allowed us to get a little bit further from the wetland based on our last conversation, design review team with Chuck involved, and Parks and Rec.
Yep.
Who's Mike Hannaford with?
Forestry,
Forestry.
Parks and Forestry, yep.
To maintain some level of clearance behind the courts, to get back there for tree removals, whatever reason. We didn't want to be right up against the buffer for that reason, and the reality is to actually build these courts, it would have required over excavation and encroachment into that 35. So as a compromise, we had to eliminate a pickleball court to allow that to happen without affecting the parking count, the building location. I mean, as you can see, it's a very tight site. So that was the last iteration. And then in the last week, and then in the last 24 hours, we refined it a little to really pull away as much as we could out of away from that 35. So we shrank up the parking lot, didn't change the space count, but eliminated some islands so that we weren't tweaking into this corner with the parking. I think this will probably be a little easier for snow removal and access. And nothing really changed with the courts, just changed the walkway so that it has this kind of central walk connecting both.
Steve, can you go back one slide just so we can
The difference.
pay attention to what happens at the lower screen, the bottom of the screen where the parking is?
Yeah, so one thing to note, like we were really up against the buffer for both of these parking areas. It gave us more green space in the front of the lot, which we were initially going to try and utilize for bioretention and filtering. We understand the concern that the dumpster location is not ideal. We looked at a number of spots trying to balance the location of it with the buffer zone and the resource area to operational and maintenance practices from the building to not. I mean, ideally, it wouldn't be great to have it across the parking lot near the pickleball courts. So when we changed that back line of the parking lot, we were able to move it about 5.5 feet further. And we are proposing that the back of that enclosure is curbed, and we could certainly plant some arborvitaes or something tall to really help with any wild trash bag throws and keep everything as contained as we can. Short of relocating it and then potentially having to put 2 more parking spaces to keep at that required count, which would then put us a little bit closer with pavement. As a general overview, I think the town's intention with this is pickleball would likely go first, just based on size and speed of this project going. Recal would come next, and then a third phase would be a trail that goes behind and connects both. As far as site prep, again, they're 2 separate projects, but we're obviously looking at them as a whole for permitting. So during construction, everything on the wetland edge would be protected, erosion control, mulch filter sock, silt fence is needed. The thought was if pickleball goes first, that some additional clearing would be required into the recal portion of the site to allow for construction entrance and staging, and then ultimately phase 2 recal second entrance if we can't utilize the first one. Concrete washout, all of that material stockpiles would be out of the buffer, out of the 100-foot buffer. Snow storage, we've looked at snow storage through a few of the iterations, but this being the most recent. We have a decent amount now that we tightened up that parking lot, and then there's still some up front. But the intent would be that no snow would be pushed beyond the buffer zone. As far as maintenance, we're looking at a generator for the building, transformer for service for the building, being in this front area, transformer and new service for the pickleball courts would be behind the courts at the end of the parking lot, dumpsters, and then trying to maintain a 12-foot clearance between the edge of the court and the 35-foot buffer. So kind of a 10 to 12-foot area behind the courts could be maintained grass or just not shrubs that the town can't get in there if they had to. And then everywhere else we would revegetate, re-establish with native seed mixes, plants, shrubs, trees. As part of the construction, we would be looking at any trees greater than 12-inch within the 35-foot buffer zone be identified and tagged with conservation and forestry, to try and protect and keep as much of that as we can. Fire access. So again, we reviewed this with public safety a couple weeks ago. We made modifications that we had discussed in that meeting, but putting an engine on the on-range road and then in the fire lane gets you full access from both angles. And then conceptually, this is not based on the most recent iteration, but the second to last one. Based on the site, there are still some unknowns, not having an updated topographic survey. We are still reviewing the geotech report with the geotechnical engineer to determine the subsurface conditions based against our design. But the intent right now is to do all subsurface detention, be it Coltex, chambers under the parking lot. It would not require us to need that landscape area in the front for filtration. So the bulk of the parking lot would be handled, or the larger unit would be handling the Cal site, and then there would be a secondary unit that would handle pickleball. Again, this is early. Obviously looking for feedback, concerns, but we'll update this eventually for the new design if that does work. Last thing is lighting. Parking lot would be lit for safety concerns, and courts need to be lit for safety concerns. The image in the middle is what we're proposing, which is the Musco LED system, which has a pretty good cutoff, as you can see in the image. The image to the right, which they are smaller fixtures, a little bit lower, but require more of them. They do throw more light. They're not as controllable as the Musco LEDs. And parking lot, we would be looking at dark sky compliant and trying to get those cutoffs as best as we can. For the Musco, there are a couple of spots. If you can see the dashed line, that's the wetland line. There are a couple spots where we do go beyond. We're not at a full 0 cutoff. The highest point is 0.6. For the parking lot, there's one spot where we're a little bit into the buffer, but the wetland line is a clear 0 cutoff while still maintaining adequate and safe lighting. I'm going to take a sip of water and open it up for questions.
And Steve,
And just mention one other thing, the building is intended to be used as a emergency shelter for managed by the fire department, and Steve pointed out where the generator was on the site. We pushed it up to the road for service, and there's no gas service in this range road, so we either have to bring gas in, we have to use propane, or we'd have to consider a diesel generator. That hasn't been decided yet, but to be a shelter for storm and heat and other events, you do need a 24-hour whole building generator, and that is being provided.
Okay, you folks ready for questions? take that as a yes. Walter, do you have any questions you wanna, or observations you wanna bring up?
Do you want
I
to
do.
go over the purpose of the working session?
Sure, that's a good point. I can go down
It's for the commissioners.
So this is a working session, which means it's not a hearing per se. We're not looking to close or do any votes on approvals or anything. This is intended to give comments, observations, things to help the town decide how and what to do about this. This is our chance to make clear anything we believe has to be considered in the plans. If we have any concerns about what we've heard already, recognizing that it's a conceptual plan at the moment, but we have any concerns about that as it is, now is the time to raise them. Anything else that I should
Sure.
say?
For the applicant, the Conservation Commission is not going to be held by anything that is said tonight. When you come in with your notice of intent, that's a new process. So we're letting you know, based on this plan, based on our thoughts tonight, what we're going to, what we see is needed. And that's also what the commission should say, what's needed to kind of help you, like a stormwater report. And you may like LEDs rather than, hard infiltration systems. You could say that kind of stuff. You could talk about the path and whatever else, and locations of dumpsters and things like that. But most importantly, there is no obligation by the commission to honor anything that's said here tonight, and don't take that anything that is said as gospel. That's the way I can say it. Thanks.
Okay, having said that, Walter, do you have anything you want to bring up?
If you have about 10 minutes, yes. I'm looking at these plans, and obviously we're putting hard surfaces on permeable surfaces. My question would be, what is the demand for pickleball? Because it looks like we're only putting up 7 courts times, 4 players, that's 28 people. Is that going to satisfy the extra demand that there is for pickleball courts?
Jenna, I would refer that question to you.
Thanks, Jane. Currently, we do have four courts at Memorial Park, and we have a couple courts that are not regulation at the high school. Our pickleball folks would ideally love 8 courts. However, in researching other communities, there's only one other community in Massachusetts that we're aware of that has 8 courts. And in similar sized communities or even larger sized communities, the maximum amount of courts that they have demand for is 6 courts. So we believe that the 7 will be adequate for our pickleball community. And there's also still some other locations right now that are available for them to use. In addition, the Recal Center will be able to provide indoor pickleball opportunities, and Recreation also does provide indoor pickleball opportunities throughout the entire year. So I believe it will meet the demand for pickleball.
Jenna, what's the utilization?
As
Go
far
ahead.
as who will have access to it, or
Mr. Talbot wanted to know, sort of like, will these be enough courts? Do we have enough usage to demand 7 courts? So I wanted to know if you could add how
Not
much we're
sure.
utilizing.
yes, I would say that there is demand for 7 courts. Right now, we have, again, 2 at the high school, and we have 4 at Memorial Park, and all of those courts are highly used. And Mike Coltman's also on the call. He's the president of Reading Pickleball, so he could maybe also speak to the demand. But I would say yes.
Well, this is going to be awkward because I'm asking also as a taxpayer at Reading, do we need that many pickleball courts, especially at the expense? And then as a commissioner, you're now covering up area that's not covered.
So the site is kind of previously disturbed, it's been filled. So, nothing's really growing too well out there. Maybe that needs to be said. I don't know if Activitas or there's a wetlands. Is there a wetland person in your group and who can explain this location and the fact that it's a filled location? Used as a dumping site?
Clearly, it's a dump.
There was a previous report done that we can submit. The wetland consultant was from the due diligence phase is from Weston and Sampson, and they're available, but they're not on the call here.
Well, I think that report would help. That might assuage some of your concerns, Walter, since it's not being built over pristine nature.
And maybe species of the trees, so we can understand if they were invasive or not.
So we should get that report.
And I did want to mention something, since we're kind of talking about trees. Steve, you mentioned that you're going to survey every 12-inch tree and talk to conservation and forestry. So I'm not sure, that might be some conversation I'm not sure of, but when conservation wants to protect trees and that we want a count of trees and to mitigate for those trees, it's 6-inch DBH and up.
Does the town require that within the entire project site or within certain buffer areas, or is it upon?
Well, it's a Conservation Commission policy and within our regulations, so it's only the Conservation Commission within the entire 100-foot buffer zone.
Okay.
So
That's
it's
going to be something
typically-
we'll have to review with the town. We had a couple of survey quotes to tag 6-inch trees in this area would be hundreds of trees. And at the time we were reviewing that, it didn't seem to make any sense, knowing that at least 2 to 35 needed to be cleared. So
Okay, but that's the point of this meeting, is to raise those kind of questions.
Okay.
So just consider it a question raised. Walter, back to you.
May I continue? Again, we're covering quite a bit of area, for example, the parking lot. Have they considered permeable pavers for the parking lot? And then for the courts themselves, I belonged to a club before I moved here where the pickleball courts were on elevated surfaces with drainage underneath. Has that been considered?
I can address the parking lot. We did consider the porous asphalt. The thought was that if we drained it and had the subsurface retention, we'd effectively get the same groundwater recharge as you would with the porous pavement, and the recharge system is substantially less maintenance for the DPW staff, who with the porous pavement have to vacuum that pavement twice a year, and while it was used quite frequently by our office at least 10 years ago, it's sort of fallen back towards the recharge in the Coltec or the other systems as being more favorable, because you can also pre-treat that water, whereas if you use a porous pavement, if there's any spill or so on the pavement, that water, that spill, when it rains, goes right through the asphalt, where as you use the Coltec, you have the pre-treatment area and then the groundwater recharge. So you have an opportunity to filter it with the Coltec.
One of your plans shows an outdoor bathroom. Is that still in the thinking?
No.
Okay. And then on the LSI report, paragraph 5, page 6, it refers to the fact that there was no groundwater testing because it wasn't required. How was that conclusion reached?
I can't speak to that. Joel, I don't,
And that LSI was not our consultant. I'd have to look at that report. That may have been a report for due diligence on the purchase side. The geotechnical report does show levels of groundwater.
Yeah, then that leads to the next question. Is there a basement on the building?
No,
Okay, so it's going to be a slab building.
correct.
Is it possible to also elevate those, I'm having problems reading it, numbers 7 and 8, the patio and the outdoor work area, can they be elevated?
The patios are flush at level with the building for handicapped access purposes. The building is flush at grade on the entry side as well for handicapped access from the parking lot. What we would typically do is make those patios in the outdoor play space permeable pavers.
So basically, the concerns I had, I'm really obsessed about the area being covered and getting permeability through it.
Okay, thank you, Walter.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. You mentioned the Weston and Sampson due diligence report. Have you seen the results? I'm curious as to if any contaminants have been detected in surface and subsurface soil.
Yeah, so the Weston and Sampson initial report referenced that they were cautioning that this was an access road to the Nike missile site, which was on the top right corner of the screen. It's off the screen where the actual missile site was. And their comment was other Nike missile sites in Massachusetts have been known to have contaminants. So to erase that concern, the town retained Wilcox, a hygienicist firm in Massachusetts, to do subsequent soil borings and analysis of the site, and it was determined to be clean.
Excuse me. They determined soils were clean, not the
That's-
water.
They determined that the soils were clean, yeah.
Okay.
Back to you.
That's it for now.
Martha.
I'm concerned about the dumpster being so close to the wetland, and I understand you moved it somewhat further from the wetland, but it seems like dumpsters always get put next to the wetland, and that can be a problem with trash and animals and stuff like that. I'm wondering if it would be possible to put it on the other end of the building, tucked into the corner near the Range Road side somehow. And that would put it out of the 100-foot wetland buffer.
yeah, we did look at that. There was a little concern with having the dumpster access right off of the road. And basically, I mean, the building and the town would have to figure out schedule, but there was that concern, and then obviously the first thing you see entering the site. But we completely understand that the dumpster is an issue.
I see what looks to be doors on the front of the dumpster facing the parking lot. Would it also have fencing all the way around all four sides?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's completely fenced in, and then beyond the fence, it's curbed.
Yeah. Okay. And with all this paving, you're talking about Caltech chambers. How would the parking lot be sloped to get the water to flow the way that you want it to go?
Again, right now, we don't have an actual topo survey that's being done. It's still early, so grading hasn't really been considered to this level. But we are using a mix of traditional, just grading the catch basins, and I think the goal would be to keep it away, like grade away from the buffer towards the underground units.
Can you show where the openings to the underground units would be using your cursor on this plot plan?
Like the discharge,
How the water gets into the underground?
it's all these dashed lines are pipes.
Okay,
So there would be catch basins along those pipes?
Catch basins are in these circles all the
Oh, I
way
see.
throughout the site. Everything is working its way to this through a network of drainage pipes to the subsurface chambers, letting it recharge, and then out. And same concept. Everything from pickleball would be pitched and graded, collected into the subsurface and discharged.
you were talking about, possibly diesel or propane generated electricity. Is there any possibility of putting, solar panels either as, carports over some of the parking spaces or on the roof of the building to provide the, backup electricity source for the building? Or some electricity for that purpose?
The roof is designed to be solar ready. One of the studies that we're doing right now with the permanent building committee is to whether the main portion of the building would have a flat roof and could have more solar panels than we currently can have that has pitched roofs on the building today. The requirements in Massachusetts for an emergency management shelter are that you have a all building 24-hour generator. So you can have solar to help supplement it, but you can't rely on solar in the event of an emergency, especially if it's in the winter, an ice storm or a snowstorm. So we could rely on the solar for some backup, but it's not, it doesn't preclude the generator and it doesn't allow the generator to be downsized.
Okay. I'm glad to hear the roof is solar ready. I would love to see, part of your plan and information about it. Calculating some payback times between the cost of putting the solar panels on and the savings in electricity. Okay, the boardwalk that goes, looks like it's part path, part boardwalk going off into the wetland. Is that expected to be part of this project, a later addition? What's going on with that?
Jenna or Jane can respond to that.
Yeah,
Sure, so it, oh,
Go ahead, Jenna.
Jane. Oh, so it was always part of the original plan. Chuck and I actually talked quite a bit about it. So it's part of the original plan, but the overall master plan of the area, if you will. So we're hoping to complete that in a later phase. We discussed as a team adding it as an alternate for the time being, but definitely in the future, prioritizing it in the master plan.
And do you have a plan for what's gonna happen to the rest of the parcel that's the existing wetland off to the right side of this picture? Is that something that could be made into conservation land?
It could. It could. That's
Okay.
been discussed, yep. There's no intention to ever develop that or anything like that. We could grant it over to conservation.
I would love to see it become conservation.
So can I pop in for a second?
Mhm.
So you said it could, what would it take? It will,
But, I mean, I'm amenable to it.
okay, but so what are the steps to make it?
I don't,
happen?
I would have to follow up with town council to get the specific granularity on the process to do that.
Cause wasn't it at one time, wasn't it going to be? Wasn't that part of the early conversation?
I think it was with Fidel and Yeah, I think way back when, yes, I agree that that was part of the initial sort of intention would be that they would go.
What changed?
I think it's, part of it is making sure that we get the recal project first, that's the first priority. And then seeing what we could do with the conservation land. So we haven't gone that far to exploring
Yeah,
how we would make it
I
conservation.
just don't see that connection because the recal project is spending money and building things in phase. Shouldn't have you. Granting the land is just granting the land, so why is that sequential?
We have limited resources with staff time and availability. So the priority for staff time is pulling these two projects forward, as well as the Killam project and the other things that we have going on in the community. So it's just what's available in terms of staff
I
time.
understand the connection.
It's not that's mainly the connection. So we have
So-
not viewed that for, this is our first conversation with
So if we
conservation.
had that as a condition, what do you think that would do?
I think that we could make that if you wanted to make that a condition, I think we would be amenable to that.
Yeah.
I have no argument with that.
Okay.
I haven't discussed that with the manager, mind you,
I understand.
so I might be saying promises I don't have the right to make, but I think that will be fun.
Well, as Chuck said, we're not held to this, I guess.
But I think that would be within the spirit of the agreement. You know, certainly we really are, all of us are enthusiastic about the trail, for instance. Everybody wants to see that happen. You know, there's no appetite for us to hold on to the wetland. We would rather give that to conservation.
I don't think that would be. an
It would
easy
make,
decision.
it is, yeah. We just, I can't speak to the process for it because we haven't put staff time into that answer for you. And so in full transparency, if you want to make a condition, I think we can make that work.
Okay.
Is that fair?
So there's also something that came up in this conversation that Steve said that we talked to town staff and I wasn't maybe part of that meeting, but there's a lot of trees coming down. And
I have a
so it's
question.
going to be, and so I was thinking when you said that in this meeting, that maybe there was that trail and land gift would mitigate the trees. Because as you said, there's going to be a lot of them. And we usually get replacement for each one or get paid for each one, at least in the buffer zone. And, we found that out. So I could see not having to take a survey of all the trees if there was some sort of mitigation on the table for the commission to consider
That'd be a
for the
reasonable
path
trade-off.
and for the land swap.
I think that makes great sense.
That's still a little bit more time.
I'm done.
There you go. So I'm a former engineer when I had a life. And so I focused on words like could, which brought that question. But also when we talked about the trail, you were saying you hope to make it happen. So my question is, why wouldn't it?
Mhm.
Why is it a separate phase 3? It's not the biggest expense in the whole thing. So what might happen to make it not happen?
Well, so these are two warrant articles that are going forward before town meeting.
Mhm.
And the pickleball group has done a lot of their own fundraising. So a lot of this effort and this exercise is to price out what that parcel would be so that they can tailor their fundraising efforts and we understand what the financial obligations would be that we would bring forward at town meeting. But it would not be intended for a debt exclusion vote. The recal project is a debt exclusion vote, right? So that is to town meeting to authorize borrowing, and then it's to a town election to approve a debt exclusion, okay? So that project is going forward on the same timeline as the Killam Elementary School project. These are two rather, substantial projects that have come through their own organic timelines
Yes.
and kind of arrived here together. So that's somewhat of the background in the process. So the only concern is cost. And we are pressuring our designer and Activitas to bring in these projects at the best price they can. And so all of this exercise and our engagement and our desire to be before you and to get your best advice that you understand now is to help us make these decisions as we do our costing. And that this project is going into cost estimates right now. So these are answers that are going to go tomorrow before our cost estimators. Joel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is why we need your input at this point. And so that's why we're seeing it. So the real question is, we all want the trail, putting it on the bid documents as an ad alternate, can we afford it based on the pricing? Is what it's gonna be brought forward to town meeting. So that's I can't promise you it's there, but we're gonna put it
Are
in.
you thinking that the additional cost of building the trail might be the straw that breaks the camel's back? That.
I mean, when you put it like that, Brian, I do.
It's straightforward.
Every dollar is accounted for, and this is, when you look at other communities that have built senior centers and CALs, right? So those are two different concepts. Prices have escalated over time, and so, what we want it to be is as financially responsible as we can make it. There are complications to building this trail that will raise prices for it. So it's not just a path, it is not, and I don't know if Activitas has any sort of idea of what that trail might cost. It's early. But you could ask for a condition. We would like to bid it separately and then be able to do it.
Sorry to cut you off.
Sorry, no, I just keep talking, so you gotta stop me.
Okay, good to know. So this whole conversation has been about mitigation. I mean, Chuck brought up the trees. Obviously, that's part of the mitigation.
Yeah.
Half of the building is over the buffer zone. A lot of the paved path in the back is is into the buffer zone.
Mhm.
And so typically we look for mitigation commensurate with the take, not in the legal sense.
I understand.
And so, talking about granting the land, obviously that's great. Conservation is always looking to protect more land. But I do think the path, is likely to be a mitigation condition.
Okay.
And this is me saying it without knowing what Activitas would come up with for a cost for it or anything.
Mhm.
But it seems like a good thing. Conservation land, Trails Committee spends forever putting trails onto these different pieces of conservation land. It's obviously a thing we do. If we get a conservation restriction, one of the conditions on it is that we can put in a path and kiosk. So it's a big driver.
Okay.
And so I think here would be a big driver. I'll stop beating that horse.
No, it's good, and Chuck has also expressed that as well, so I think
Not-
that is.
Not as well.
No, couldn't be possibly as well as you, but no, I appreciate that, and I thank you for that.
So I have some other questions. Is there gonna be a fence around the courts?
Yeah, the perimeter of the courts would have a 6-foot fence and then some 4-foot high fence dividing them.
Okay. All right, so, I mean, obviously that's very near the 35-foot, so it's probably worth showing it on here so we can understand what, if any, encroachment there is into the 35 foot.
Wouldn't the
It's on
fence
there, it's
be
zoom
on,
in.
isn't the fence on the
The
back
fence,
side of
yeah,
the court?
the fence is within the court.
Oh, okay, I was thinking it was beyond the manicured lawn, if you will, outside of the court.
Everything is contained within that perimeter.
Good. So I have thoughts also on the parking space. It's no surprise, we're always looking to minimize surface coverage. Walter talked about that to some extent. So is there a way to have less parking and count more on people coming across the street from the Burbank parking area? And the reason I'm thinking is that side of the building is more the community center. So it won't be so many seniors per se. So there'll be people who are more able and willing to walk. So perhaps that's a way to minimize the parking. And actually, when you look at it, the distance to the back of the parking lot is further than going across the street to the Burbank parking, depending on how far you go in it. So I'm just trying to understand why you had the constraint of 90 spaces there as opposed to taking advantage of more across the street?
The 90 spaces is based on the use of the building during, we did different scenarios, but the hours of operation of the senior center dominate the use charts and the capacity of the building. So on a typical day, there could be a lunch program, and that room itself holds 100 seats at lunch easily. And there's other parts of the building that would be used by seniors. And since it's primarily a senior-centric building from 8 or whatever time it opens in the morning until 3, it's used at other times, but those hours are heavily used by seniors. We want to have a parking lot that's handicapped accessible, smooth, easily traversed, maintained, and the Burbank path of travel from that Burbank lot across Range Road to the building entry isn't necessarily an accessible path. Now, not every space needs to be accessible, but we do like to have as many spaces near the entry of the building, so you can see the handicap parking or the accessible parking to the lower side of the parking lot is right there at the entry.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand and I agree with it. I think there should be.
Just
accessible
the
spaces.
basic need is somewhere between 70 and 90 spaces for the seniors. There's also staff. Now, you could park staff across the road, but the agreement with Burbank is to use that lot for surge parking, not for everyday parking. That's not really a town-owned lot. That's a Burbank Arena lot. So the agreement is when there's a surge to use it, but not for all everyday parking. If we use it for all everyday parking, then there's a liability that they incur on a daily basis if somebody slips in their parking lot and all those things. So I will say that the number of spaces is based on a lot of other senior centers that we and our traffic consultant have done, and their current senior centers. So there have been centers for active living in Sandwich, Sudbury, Pembroke, senior centers alone in Falmouth, Situate, Chatham. All these statistics have been compared, and we're trying to get, a good everyday parking on this side of the road, serving the building, and then the surge capacity on the other side. But it's not an arbitrary number.
Oh, I didn't think it was arbitrary. I just wondered what was behind it. So.
We'd love to make it smaller. The problem is that people drive to the buildings and,
Although presumably, if there were fewer, if you want to just imagine it, and people felt constrained on parking, people would actually carpool, which would be good from an environmental perspective as well. Are you expecting most of the people using the pickleball courts to be across the street in back of Burbank? Or are they going to be in that parking area also, the 90 spaces?
We hope the space in the front of Recal is for Recal, not for pickleball. So they're parking across the street in the Burbank lot.
And how do you
on the back side.
So how do you intend, on the backside, how do you intend to encourage that?
Well, yeah, you mean, how do you keep people from parking in the Recal parking lot?
I mean, you can keep them from, but how do you discourage it? So how do you make it less likely?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to do signage and to put signage on this.
And communication through the rec department.
All right. Can you explain to me, in the legend, number 6 says Range Road expansion to future pickleball courts? Where are they? What are they?
I think that might have been a carryover from one of the earlier.
Yeah, the earlier, we've been struggling with how to attribute the cost and the phasing of the road. So number 6 was an alternate for the the cost estimators, because if it's just not clear what's going first and second in terms of the road and pickleball and how the road's being funded. We're putting that together with the estimates. That was the purpose of identifying that extension of the road by pickleball as a separate cost.
So there are no plans anymore to do more pickleball courts?
No, it's just to attribute that section cost and then determine which
was-
project that goes with.
And if that thought changed in the future somehow miraculously, that would be another project, a separate
That would
project.
be different.
I knew you.
Boy.
Let's see. I'm curious about the surfaces you guys are planning for, like the patio area, the outside fitness area. What are you thinking that would be? Again, just to give you a heads up, is there some way you can make it somewhat pervious? So go ahead and answer the question.
I think we're proposing
Yeah, go ahead.
pavers, permeable pavers on the two areas identified with the number 8, and then the red outdoor fitness area would be proposed as poured in place surfacing with subsurface drainage.
Okay. And where would that drainage go to?
It would tie into the system, into the
Okay.
parking lot.
And runoff from the roof would go into the same system?
Yep.
Okay. Which side of the building is that kitchen on? Is that on the side nearest the road or furthest away?
It's on the side nearest the road.
So it's furthest away from the dumpster location.
Well, the kitchen is, that's correct. The lounge and some of the other arts and crafts rooms at the other end of the building, they generate a lot of refuse as well. So
Yeah, I was just thinking, I think all of us obviously have concerns over the location of the dumpster. I can't tell you how many times we've had, call it a violation, visit to respond to dumpsters that are out of control, either overflowing or doors have come off and things blow around all over the place. So I'm just looking at this and saying that's almost inevitable. So the further away it could be, the better that would be. I understand your thoughts about first thing you see when you come in, there could be some screening bushes there. And when you started talking about it, your first statement was kind of hanging where you said, first thing next to the road would be a problem. Why? Are you expecting people to crash into it?
No, having it because of the proximity of the building to the road, a trash truck would literally be in the road, blocking it, trying to remove the dumpsters. So it was more of a safety issue with the road. Was the first point.
And Steve, to that point, if I may, I believe public safety raised that when we sat with police and fire to talk about that.
They preferred it in the parking lot off of the road.
Okay. Yeah, and just if there's something you could do to ensure that trash that does get free from trash bags or the dumpster in general, it gets caught in the enclosure. There should be some rules to say you must close that door. The door has to be in working condition.
Brian, just like public safety said, it can't be in the road. Conservation can say it can't be right there.
Oh, yeah, I'm aware of that.
Well, they need to know it. They're going
Well, okay,
they're going to a budget meeting tomorrow.
Right, but I think,
Okay.
I think they've heard that we all
Yeah.
talk about concerns about the location of the dumpster. So that would be something that I would be looking to be somewhere else without constraining where it is. We don't do designs. We just say if we like the designs you present.
I think another reason why the dumpster could be moved and to help other people think about it, that maybe not be focused on dumpsters most of their adult life. When the dumpster is further into the populated area of the site, when the animals get into it, and this is a site that has wildlife all around, so they're gonna still own this for a while. When the trash is out by the front of the building, it's picked up by everyone. when the trash is out of the dumpster at the back of the building and it blows into the wetland, it stays.
It's outside.
Separate pieces of trash are not even a violation of the WPA. So it just stays there.
I'd love to see the dumpster next to the transformer and generator.
That's what I was just.
And the trash truck, we could say like, no parking here on Thursday, and the trash truck could pull right in, back up to that spot and then pull out again.
Again,
Yeah,
we're into
that's-
design, but
I know,
Yeah.
that's what I was trying to.
But, you know, you don't want it next to the road, you don't want it blocking the road, but that seems to be a spot that could be
so typically
accessible.
what happens is they'll see all of our list of things that we
Mhm.
need and they'll redesign everything. So that might not even exist
Yeah.
in the next iteration.
Okay, so my next question has to do with that green space around the generators. I know this is just a conceptual drawing, but that shows just a few landscape trees. Why not leave the trees that are naturally there? And have that be a natural screen rather than clearing them and putting in a few pretty trees.
Yeah, it's a valid point. I think that's something, I mean, based on the existing conditions in the aerial, that's kind of the area where it's been a dumping ground. There actually aren't trees right in that area, but once we have a final survey, we can certainly look at that and see if we can protect some of that existing vegetation, so long as it works with the grades.
So long as they're not invasive or exotics, like tree of heaven or something.
Could you go back to the screen where you're showing the snow storage? I got that you said it's outside the buffer.
At the 35.
Okay, so is it the blue shaded area?
Can you zoom in a little bit there, Steve?
So my concern, and maybe it's over the top, is plowing all that snow there. Obviously, it's right next to the wetlands, so it's going to melt and it's going to run there. So whatever's in that snow is going to be that much closer to the wetlands. One of the reasons you have the buffer is because that's more distance for the natural extraction process of contaminants and what have you. You just took away most of that 100 feet by putting the snow over there on that side. I asked him to put it back up so I could suggest another place. I don't have another place.
Is that to scale? Because that looks like it's like 60 feet wide.
Yeah, it's a good question too. I was thinking this is conceptual.
Of course, it's only 50 feet wide, but whatever.
Yeah, and so just my concern is having the snow, at least most of it, be stored right next to the wetland.
Yeah, so there's a good example at what's that called?
Artists?
Artists, yeah, thank you. At Artists, where they prepped an area with a surface, they use gravel up there and they put the snow into that area. But what's good about that situation is all the trash remains in the spring. They can just pick it up instead of like fishing
Yeah.
through the brush. So
I mean, one thing you might think about, and I'm not gonna design anything, but if you had ports there, access to your storage, water storage system, and you had like a curb around it, then the snow would melt there and the water would run towards the area you're already storing the water. The thought, I have no idea if it's practical or not.
yeah, I think they do something like that in Natick. They just put snow in one area.
Jane or Jenna, do you want to talk to the conversation about this being a town property that came up in a couple of those meetings, that it would be removed
Right. Yeah, I
fairly
guess-
soon? So in that case, if that was the case, I think the goal would be to just push it in the keep it in the parking lot and close off a portion of the parking lot for a temporary day or two, and then anything that's melting is going into the system.
So I can speak a little bit and give that a little bit more color. Thank you, Steve, for that suggestion. So the typical process when we do snow and ice operations during a storm, which you probably maybe don't notice or you notice, is for example, in town hall parking lot, it's plowed. We clear as many spaces as possible and they put the snow in a particular place. Once snow and ice operations end after the storm ends, the first night following the first day they can sleep. So for example, they plowed overnight 5 a.m. to 3 p.m. or something like that in the last storm. So it's a long time. Or 5 p.m. to 3 p.m. I can't remember. It was a very long time. They go home and they sleep. They come in and they work the next morning at 7 a.m. And then that night, they work overnight to clear out the edges. It's the same DPW crew. So they'll go home and then they'll come back to do an overnight shift and they will do snow removal operations. And so that's when they clear out edges all along, certain streets. They break down snow piles and they put them into trucks. We have huge blowers. They're very cool.
And that then goes to Camp Curtis Guild.
That we don't want to, yes, they do.
They're not supposed to tell where it goes.
Oh, sorry.
It goes there. So then snow and ice that are retained on site would melt. So I believe what Steve's talking about is some of the conversations we've had with Public Works, that because it's town property, typically what would happen is we would kind of pile it off to the side that first day, get it as clear as possible. Facilities would manage the walkways directly adjacent to the building. And then when it comes time for snow removal, we would go back out and pull a lot of snow
So you
off
think it
the
would be a
site.
problem adding one more area to the list of places they'd have?
I mean, I think it's, my personal opinion is, this is town property and it's our responsibility to care for it appropriately. And so, we have to talk about what staffing looks like and our vendors and so forth, but it's just schools, town hall.
Yeah.
We already care for the Pleasant Street Center. To,
So a
maintain our
condition
buildings.
could be, snow piling up in these areas in the buffer zone. That means what I'm hearing is they're gonna leave it in the parking lot anyways and remove it like the next day.
Yeah, I still think it'd be good to have some kind of drainage going to the regular system. You know how it is, sometimes it gets snow and it melts. So by the time they get their sleep, it would already be melting.
Where are they storing it?
Yeah.
That's the important part. If it's in the parking area, then they don't have to set up what we have at Artis,
Anything extra, yeah.
and they don't have any trash removal throughout the spring.
I knew of a facility once that had a tennis court and they built it so that they would stockpile the extra snow of the tennis court in the wintertime because no one was using the tennis court. It beat up the tennis court a little bit
I was
more
like, yeah.
than normal, but it was an alternative bet.
What I will tell you is that I have come to learn something quite interesting about our pickleball community that I didn't know. I don't play pickleball. I probably should, but this is a population that will play in all seasons. So I don't think we can store anything on those courts because they will be out there using them at every opportunity. Mr. Coldman, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But that is, am I wrong?
You are 100%.
You are right.
There we go. So,
30 degrees or higher.
they are a tenacious group I admire and need to, get on board with the pickleball. But at any rate, yes. It's a good point, but I also wouldn't want to put
Lights.
money into the design and then store snow on it if we could avoid it.
Okay. I had one more. Well, we'll have the usual conditions like erosion control in place before construction started, pre-construction meeting, those kind of things, right? Those are the standards. One last one. All right, so if you could go back to the conceptual drawing, not this one, but the one, no, yes, that one. It looks like there's either a new or rehabbed road going right up to the Y, where it branches off to the left to go to Burbank. Is that just the way it's drawn, or is that correct?
This is new. Range Road would be expanded from the connection at Simmons Way to just beyond this curb cut entrance to the back of the parking lot.
Okay, the
Right
reason
now,
I-
17 feet.
The reason I ask is because that part looks like it's maybe the closest to the, well, in fact, some of it's inside the 35-foot. All right, I was just wanting to be sure that you are gonna be paving there.
That section's already paved where
Yeah.
the yellow line is.
Yeah, that's what I was asking, if it's gonna be rehabbed or anything. Are you doing any work on it? You doing any milling?
Yeah, so the plans don't show the existing size of the road and then what you're expanding it to. And so the
The earlier-
regulations, you're allowed to do maintenance, but not substantially enlarge the existing road. So if you do that, you fall under a different section of the WPA. So it would be good to have that information when you come back for your notice of intent.
Yeah, we'll have all of the existing conditions cleaned up with more information, but this dashed line is essentially from here to Simmons Way. It's about an 18-foot wide road, which isn't two-way, so it has to be widened to allow for both of these uses to be implemented.
All the more reason to get some mitigation. Martha, you have another question?
Yeah, but I'm willing to go after our public person.
Lucas Prado, 85
Well,
Hancock. Oh, I'm sorry.
We should do commission first,
Okay.
and then Chuck, and then.
Okay. Fine.
Pardon me, putting them back in the
That's
bus.
fine. I was just,
My question is that the whole back of the building and the path behind the building is right up against the 35-foot line, or even the path goes over the 35-foot line. And often there's a lot of construction vehicle traffic behind where a building is going in. So where would you put the erosion control on that side of the building where you're so close to the 35-foot line?
I mean, in this scenario, the erosion control would be beyond the 35-foot, and we would be asking for to do that work.
Okay. Just be aware that we always ask for a 25-foot zone of natural vegetation. And it would be much easier to protect that zone of natural vegetation than to have to rebuild it after it's been torn up by construction vehicles. So would you be able to fit in that outer 10 feet, the construction work that you need to do?
When you say the outer 10 feet,
Yeah, going from the 35-foot line closer to the swamp until you get to the 25-foot line. If
Yeah.
that was where we restricted the construction vehicles to not go closer to the swamp, closer to the wetland line than the 25-foot line. Is that something that you could build into your plans?
So I think what we're asking for is just on the plan, when you present the notice of intent, to have a limit of work. And
Yes,
so then we can react to that.
and you should also put it.
yeah, I mean, we had a limit here.
And would we know
I
where the
still don't
35
see the 25-foot
and
line.
would we know where
on
the
it.
35-foot line is or the 25-foot line?
We'll show the 25. We're currently showing 35, which is, I think, what we've shown on other projects.
Well,
We'll
typically
show the
we like
25.
25, 35, and 100. So that's what should be on the plan.
So the reason, what prompting the question, in Reading, the first 25 is no disturb. The next 10 for 35 altogether is no structure. And then the 100-foot buffer is obviously the larger one. So that's where Martha's question is about keeping the construction vehicles entirely out of that 25-foot area.
Okay, well, we'll work that out.
That's it.
Yep, that was it.
Okay, two more questions. Could you describe a little bit in a little more detail what the design requirements are for dark sky compliance? For lighting?
We can follow up with that. I'm not an electrical engineer, but we did go through this very heavily on a recent project at Birch Meadow. And it's relative to the light spread. Hang on one second. We can follow up with that.
Okay, thanks. You
There's
showed
a difference between dark sky compliant, dark sky friendly.
But you said dark sky compliant?
It is dark sky compliant.
You showed a figure with emergency fire access. And I'm just curious, is there a way to ensure that in the event of a fire that the spray water could be directed away from the wetland or somehow contained so it doesn't run off into the wetland?
I guess I would have to send that question to the fire department,
I'm just curious.
public safety. Yeah.
And once these pickleball courts are constructed, does that mean the tennis courts, for example, at Memorial Park would be used only for tennis, or would those also be open for pickleball?
Conservation question.
That's a Jenna question, I think.
I think the intention is that the pickleball play will move from Memorial Park to these courts because of the noise complaints that we get from neighbors and the accessibility issues that are currently at that court. These courts will be far more accessible to our population of pickleball players. And Eileen, I think, is in the meeting as well, so she could speak to that. And Michael's on the call too if they want to chat about that.
I am here. Thanks, Jenna. I hadn't
Excuse
heard,
me.
I thought
Could you introduce yourself?
sorry. Eileen Manning, I'm a member of the Reading Pickleball Players Board. I hadn't heard that Memorial Park would be no longer pickleball. I thought it was going to be dual use tennis pickleball with a lot more ability for tennis players to get on there at pickleball's moved.
Right. So this is Mike Coltman, president of RPPA, the Reading Pickleball Players. This location would become the primary location for pickleball in the town. But as I think was mentioned, the demand for pickleball is quite high, and there might be still some demand for Memorial Park. Memorial Park is used for tennis even now in the spring, and at any time it can be used for tennis. So it's just that the demand for pickleball is so high that the usage gets up in the 90% utilization framework.
Okay, Michael, thanks.
Thank you.
We got it.
Yeah, I would love for Jim Sullivan, our recreation administrator, to weigh in on the conversation. And that's something that we can talk with the pickleball folks about and our recreation administrator. But one of the main reasons that we moved pickleball from Birch Meadow was because of the neighborhood impact. And the Memorial Park courts currently do have a high neighborhood impact. So moving them into this location and making the Memorial Park courts specifically for tennis would probably be the best bet as far as the neighborhood impact that we've been hearing about in the complaints. So
Okay,
certainly Jim can weigh in at
That's
another
good.
time with the pickleball folks.
that's okay. That's not a huge conservation concern, but I'm glad we had the conversation, I guess. Anything else, Tony?
Nothing else.
Chuck, do you have anything you want? You have nothing?
Yeah, I had a few questions, but they're mostly for, I don't know if you can answer them, just add them to the plan. So I was looking at one of the reports, and I didn't find the groundwater, seasonal high groundwater in B6. And that's exactly where you're putting the infiltration in there, and I was just wondering if, I see that it looks like there were tests in that area. And then I looked further into it and I couldn't find any towards from B6, which is the center of the parking lot, heading towards the pickleball area. So I was wondering if that information could be provided because infiltration only works if you have 2 feet of ground, 2 feet of separation between groundwater. So that information would be, and it would be in the stormwater. So you're gonna provide a stormwater report, right?
Yeah, there'll be a full stormwater report. And are you referring to are you referring to an old report, the LSI, or?
I don't know. It's what we were provided and I uploaded and sent to the commission. We were provided it about a week ago.
It's called the LSI final report.
It's, there's been a more recent geotechnical report that does indicate the groundwater levels. We'll have that for you.
Throughout the site, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know that you moved the pickleball courts up and now there's a grass area in back of the pickleball courts. What's the maintenance that's going to be required there? Is it possible to let that grow in and once a year, cut it? Or just let it grow in and then cut down any woody vegetation that may grow in over a couple of years? I think the not mowing it each week would help stop any pickleballs that make their way over the fence. And then obviously it's very close, it's within the buffer zone. And I'm sure another spot to mow is not desirable for the forestry and the, yeah.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know that it's something that's mowed every week. I think that needs to be clarified by forestry on the limitations of what they can get through if needed. It wouldn't be any shrubs, anything heavy like that, but I don't see why we couldn't do some kind of perennial rye, let it grow, or tall fescue, just let it go. And if they needed to drive a truck on it in an emergency to remove a tree or something, nothing's stopping them from doing that.
Sure, I'm gonna have all those decisions made before the notice of intent is in front of the commission, or is
That's
that?
the hope.
Okay. It just sounded like that was gonna be left up to forestry. Okay.
The plan.
So there's, so you're over the 35-foot line in a couple of areas in our regulations, you have to apply for a variance. There was a lot of discussion about the, mitigation. And to me, it almost seemed like that was a wish and we hoped that you complied to that, so that the Conservation Commission could feel good about this project. It's actually part of our regulations. You need to cover and get over those hurdles. We need compensation for the disturbance through mitigation, through the tree cutting, and through the encroachment over the 35-foot line. So there will be a requirement, I don't know what it is, to do that compensation. And it would be part of the order of conditions. And typically that's written in a way to ensure that it happens. So I'm not sure about this ad alternate stuff. I don't know how that goes and how that's going to be worked out, but I wouldn't try to it. I'd say it as if I'm not an employee. That should be part of this project from the start. And you should be asking the town meeting to fund that also, because the project doesn't get approved unless it's part of the complete package. That's just kind of where I'm going.
I'm not going to restate it.
Well, no, I just want to make sure that it's absolutely clear. We're removing trees, and I understand you can't plant those, so this would be a way to do that. And then the variance request, it's just additional paperwork. You actually have to tell us what you're mitigating and what your mitigation is.
Okay.
So we have 6-inch trees rather than 12-inch trees. Snow storage should be outside of the buffer zone. It sounds like there's a way to do that. And then when we were talking about the lights, typically when I see photometrics, the lights fade just beyond the surfaces, not in the grass or in the woods. Was there an attempt to cut the spillage to zero just beyond the pickleball courts and just beyond the parking area?
Yeah, we're still working through that. We've done 3 or 4 different iterations. The light spillage from the pickleball courts, I get that it's not a complete zero cutoff, but I think it's going from like 40-foot candles on the court to like 2 just feet away. So the intent is to try and corral that spill in as much as we can while still providing safe conditions on the court, short of just plugging in a light.
Did you check if I know the delineation didn't go into the wetlands, but did you check this area on Mass Mapper for vernal pools? Because the lighting during certain seasons would affect that.
I didn't
Typically,
personally,
big wetland areas aren't mapped out for vernal pools. It's just
Yeah, I did look at the vernal pools on our GIS.
there's some across the street, I know. So they are in the area. So
But I don't know what.
you can make an assumption that there's probably some over here.
GIS does not show vernal pools on this side as far as I know. I know they show it on the north side of Simmons Way.
Yeah, so that's consistent with what I was saying, which is no one really looks for vernal pools in a protected wetland. But since they're in the area, you can assume that they're probably in this wetland also. So I'm just gonna, I don't know if I mentioned this stuff already, but I'm just gonna say the things that the commission is looking for. So we're looking for a tree count, 6-inch DBH and up. This is from what I took during the course of this meeting. Wetland report on the soils and the lot inventory, which was about Walt's question about, why is it okay to cut down the trees and cover up this area? And I was talking about how it was previously altered. And then groundwater testing in the infiltration area. And there's no mitigation for the trees except for the trail and the land swap or the gift.
Correct.
Move the dumpster, snow storage in the buffer zone should be removed. And then dark sky compliant at the edges or as close to the edges as you can get. And I know, Steve, that you were saying to try to get it close, but it seemed like even, like I'm just guessing at that grass. I know it's a conceptual plan. It's probably 20 feet. And so the spillage is within the first few feet. And so that went right up to the tree line. I hope that can be worked on. That's all I have, Brian.
I have a question. So regarding the mitigation for the project, these are, as a reminder, 2 separate projects. So when we bring them forward again for the notice of intent, do you want us to, and we can work with you on this in workshop, but just so that we're clear about how to delineate the trail as mitigation versus the land grant as mitigation if one project passes and the other one doesn't. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's why we talked about the phasing, that's part of it. So I don't have an objection to the trail at all, but if just the pickleball project passes, doing the trail may be difficult, Mr. Tillman.
So I think it would be helpful. That goes back to the tree survey, right? I mean, obviously, maybe not obvious. Pickleball area, probably a smaller area, maybe fewer trees. That may change what we'd like to see for mitigation. Likewise, the rest of it, the parking lot or down is a bigger area, maybe more trees. So that's something we'd have to talk through, I would think. Walt, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I do. I have a question. Is a trail mitigation? It seems to me it has impact.
It does have impact, but it's a public benefit. And it's part of that public benefit for our people that are conservation minded and open space minded that would want to use this trail. I see it as mitigation. I don't make a vote, I don't have a vote, but it's up to the Conservation Commission. So if this mitigation package of the land gift and the trail is adopted and approved, then those two areas become the responsibility of the Conservation Commission, just like we have area at Bear Meadow. So I think it's a good thing. Obviously we're trying to get something out of a project that doesn't have, what would it have, like an area to plant trees. They're using most of their area for all of this construction. So.
Yeah, that's a problem we often have in a constrained area, because typically when we ask for mitigation, it's plant these trees, plant these bushes, put in cover layers. There's no place to do that, which is why we're looking for something else.
Sure.
In this case, it's something else. Pretty much there.
Yeah, and Walter, we do have a precedent of accepting trails as mitigation on other projects. At least one that you've been involved in and one that was approved just before I became a member of the commission.
And also knowing that you've walked many conservation areas and DCR areas, you know that trails are how we get the population out into the wetlands. And if you can't get people out into the areas that you're protected, no one supports these areas. So I think it's good. It's a good public benefit. It's a good, it's a nice walking trail for an area that probably needs one. I mean, you're really not going to go, down the street because there's a gun range down there. So that's my thought. It's allowed in the WPA, so they don't consider it, alteration.
Any follow-up, Walter? You all set?
Yeah, thanks, Walter.
Matthew, you had a late blooming question?
Yeah, I just realized something that might need to be in your plan when you're submitting. It looks like you have some trees along the edge of the parking lot that might be pre-existing trees that you're gonna keep. And you also have that thick 35-foot border that seems to have a lot of tree growth in it. And if there are trees that need to be protected from getting damaged by construction vehicles with that yellow fencing stuff and the wooden stakes like they had on Woburn Street not so long ago, it would be good to indicate which trees are gonna be protected if they are near the limit of work line or within the limit of work line.
So you're asking for a planting plan. And I had
Not just planting,
No,
but
that's
tree
tree
protection.
As part of the site preparation and erosion control, we would do tree protection.
Yeah, good.
If I could add one thing to that tree protection, one thing we learned on other projects is that fencing needs to be far enough out to protect the roots. So essentially drip line.
Typically the
canopy.
drip line.
Yeah, right. Okay, because we've seen it be closer than that and have some issues, so.
So, in the notice of intent, will we see a planting plan that will identify all the trees that are going in, or I didn't know, like sometimes these areas are parks, and then Mike has a different method of doing the tree planting. So how is that working? Is there going to be a planting plan with this, or the trees?
There would be a planting plan with this,
Okay.
Once we get the final survey and finalize the design, sometimes early in a notice for a notice of intent, we don't necessarily identify each tree specifically, but we would provide a native plant list, a suggested tree list, and it would be coming from that.
And the locations, right? Quantities and locations. Okay.
Quantities and locations to be confirmed, but
When you list the species for the trees, we have a preference for true natives as opposed to horticultural varieties.
Okay. Anything else from the commission? No. Chuck? No. You had a question, sir? Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Lucas Prado, 85 Hancock Street. Just a suggestion with regards to the snow storage. There's a giant gravel parking lot behind the ice rink. If the town is able to front end load it, like pile it up in your parking lot, front end load it, dump it in, which I would assume was further away from the conservation land. And dump it, store it there.
It's a good
instead.
suggestion. As I just learned, we apparently don't talk about where the snow goes, so it will go somewhere. Okay, I think that's it for this short meeting. Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank all of you.
Thank you.
thank you guys.
Mr. Chen, thank you very much. I appreciate your time this evening. Good job.
Yeah, thanks. Moving right on.
All right,
Continuation.
so our next topic is actually 0 Vine Street. And per the applicant's request, they've asked for continuation to February 12th, I believe.
Is that true?
Okay. For some reason it's not the one I printed. Therefore, we don't need any commentary from the commission. I understand you gents want to have a short time period to something to the record, so please introduce yourself.
No, not in this meeting. They only can talk in public open forum.
Sorry.
And we're not even advising it. They shouldn't be talking about this meeting. About this without the here, they shouldn't be talking about, so that's our stance, but we can't stop them for talking at public open forum. So whenever you choose to do that, but we have to close this and continue.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Sorry for that.
That's okay.
So do you need a motion to
Yes.
continue to February 12th? I move so.
This is Tony, I second.
Walter Talbot's in favor.
Martha Moore in favor.
Tony Rodolakis in favor.
Rambo in favor. Okay, it's continued to February 2nd,
Second.
12th.
This would fall under the when I decide thing. Things that are not expected may be discussed.
So I can now have a brief.
Well, a chair's privilege, you can put anything you want, anywhere you want on the agenda.
So we will now have a brief public forum. And again, please keep it brief.
All set. My name's Jim Riley, 87 Hancock Street. I've lived pretty much in the same location on Hancock Street for 60 plus years. I'm gonna try to keep this, I am gonna keep it real short. First concerning thing I have relative to this proposed MBTA second rail turnback track is we, the town of Reading, and even the town manager, has not gotten a formal document explaining what is going on, how they're gonna do this. It's all bits and pieces. Based on what we know, I provided Chuck before this meeting a few copies of what we call our first pass list of concessions.
You know, what we get to Bill, you want?
Is our first pass list of concessions. There's a cover sheet on it. This is what we feel would be important if Conservation Commission accepted the MBTA's proposal. The last two things I want to say is my house is level with the railroad track. It borders Linear Field and Bird Reserve. He's my neighbor. And our houses would see the trains constantly moving back and forth on this. I understand this is a Conservation Commission, and I'm gonna leave it at that, but we don't want a diesel locomotive staging rail yard in our backyards. That's one. And the last thing is, I just say it all the time, Reading residents' health and well-being must be taken precedence over MBTA business issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, and are you both aware that the select board is going to have a meeting on February 4th and the MBTA? They're attending that meeting and they'll present. I mean, that's in air quotes. I don't know how deep they'll get into it, but it seems like that meeting's been set aside for this discussion item. And then the Conservation Commission will continue their meetings on the 12th. So at least we'll hear what the select board has to say at that meeting.
And we have got the agreement from Matt, town manager, that we're gonna have a meeting with him personally next week as a sit down to discuss our issues and concerns. And what Luke's here for, but he's not gonna get into it, is alternative solutions to the turnback track. Very good solutions, believe me. Some of the homework we've done is amazing.
Good, and we appreciate you putting that on the record.
Yeah, sorry, just to add, Lucas Prado, 85 Hancock Street, just to kind of add, Chuck, I think I sent the email of that new document that we found from the MBTA rep that was here last week. Sent it to, Alistair. There's a document that he put together in 2022 of the turnback track being proposed to be in Reading Station. So just another.
It's not coming up, we're in conservation.
I believe I sent that out.
Yeah, and just another note too for us, once again, and we were here last night for the select board, we're just looking for a voice. One thing that we are doing too, and not this coming Saturday, the following Saturday, we're going to hopefully host as many residents as we can at the library and inform them of what we've gathered for information.
Are you inviting any commissioner that would like to show up for that?
Sure. Actually, yes.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Open invitation.
Can you send an email to Chuck that he could distribute to the commissioners?
Yep.
So at least we're aware of it.
And what's the date of that?
It's not this Saturday, the Saturday
February
this
1st. Right? No.
Yeah, that'd be right, because then the board's on the Tuesday and that would be.
Yeah, anybody's welcome.
Okay,
Good.
Thank you very much for letting us.
thank you. Thank you.
Excuse me. Hello.
Oh,
Excuse
wait a
me.
minute, Walter has his hand up.
Sorry, Walter, did it again.
Chuck, may I speak to these gentlemen as a fellow citizen and not as a commissioner?
It's up to
As
the chair.
long as you
I'm
are.
saying no. I'm gonna
30 seconds, go for it.
There's so many of the worries you have, which I'm very in favor of, but my hands are tied by being a commissioner. May I recommend, especially things like air pollution, to contact the Climate Advisory Committee that the town has?
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you.
Good. And thank you to gents. And now we'll move on to our next topic. This is old new business. First item is the town forest, red pine tree thinning discussion. Bill Sullivan is with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
5 minutes.
All right, well, thank you for having me and the opportunity to talk about the recently phase 4 tree cutting. Can I share my screen? I have a very brief
Yes.
presentation.
Absolutely can.
3 of you have seen it, actually 4 of you have seen it, but I know Tony hasn't. But,
I have to confess, Chuck asked us to go out over the weekend and I did not get out before the snow, and then I chose not to go out in the bitter cold. So I have not been to see the results of the tree cutting.
So just out of curiosity, did anybody else make it out there?
Chuck did.
Chuck did, yeah.
I was out before.
Okay,
I made it a few days before the trees were cut.
okay, no, that's good. It's way better than I did. Okay, Bill, you're up.
Okay, thank you. All right, so as I said, this is the 4th phase. We've had 3 prior phases of removing the dead pine trees, and this one is hopefully, we expect will be the final one. Just for orientation within the town forest, the areas included in the prior work were done in 2020, 2022, and last year. So this time around, we did areas shown in kind of an orange red at 5, 12, and 13. 5 and 13 were particularly difficult areas. That's why we did them last, because much of them were on slopes. And so as we talked about when we had our, the pre-bid sidewalks with y'all, and there was really no way to get the logs out. So what the condition was, and the recommendation of our certified forester and the DCR, was to lay the logs flat and perpendicular to the slope and in contact with the ground, and then cut in lengths of about 10 feet. So in so doing, they will decompose faster than if we've seen it in the town forest ourselves, that places where trees have fallen and they're held up by others, caught in snags, they just stay for a very long time. But in contact with the ground, this will expedite their, and they're so light, there's really nothing left to them. I mean, there's one log that, one of those 10-foot lengths, I could just pick it up with one hand, because it's just, there's nothing left. So, and it's again, also from area 5. You can see a lot of shrubs there that, we'll fill in once we get to its spring. Area 12 was an area that we could use equipment because it was flatter, but it was easy to get the equipment in there. You can see the pile, that's a piece, that's the machinery. Let's see if this works. Yeah, see how it grabs the tree up near the top there, and then it brings it down. And you can see that the other maples around it, how they're sort of swaying, but because with this piece of equipment, it's much more surgical than just going in and cutting it down. Like that, it can be done with other pieces of equipment. And then from there, those trees were then brought to that chipper, and the chipper then chipped them up and they brought them into those trucks and were able to haul them away. And area 13 was much like area 5. It was up on a narrow trail, a narrow esker, and so those were likewise were dropped and laid parallel, perpendicular to the slope and in contact with the ground. And that's the last one. That's pretty much the presentation.
Great.
So we had a sidewalk on the 13th, Monday, and it was Chris Pryor from Department of Conservation and Recreation. He's our service forester that covers the area. Bill Benjamin, our certified forester. Chuck was there, and Dan Mayer of Mayer Tree, and Mike Hannaford, our tree warden, and Mike Hessman from DPW. So Chris Pryor, our DCR service forester, was very pleased with the work. He actually sent me an email, which I could just read a couple lines of, if you're interested. He said, I've been impressed with the work in the Reading Town Forest to ensure public safety of all users, but also to consider future health of the forest as a whole. There are plenty of other municipalities who are not as thoughtful about management of the town forest. The recent harvest, like the 3 phases that I've seen, followed the approved forest cutting plan, forestry best management practices, and additional recommendations of the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program. The forest is well suited to provide the residents of Reading a multitude of benefits into the future, including recreation opportunities, water quality protection, wildlife habitat, and carbon sequestration. So, and Chuck can certainly speak to that final site visit and what he heard from the foresters there. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Maybe I'll just talk briefly about my walk out there. I went out there the day before the snow, whatever that was, Friday, Saturday. And I went to all the areas and I agree they did a pretty good job of putting them perpendicular to the slope. Many of the trees are in the ground. There are some that didn't quite get flat, but in general, that seems to be okay. I did see on the Ridge Trail, there was an owl rescue a few months ago, and there was a line running up a still standing tree that had been snagged by one of the fallen trees. I'm assuming that that's a line they left in case they had to go back to go up to the nest or something. But that's probably something you guys should address. I don't know whether you just free it somehow or cut it or something. And I can show you a picture afterwards.
That'd be great.
I'm not saying anything other than, I guess, for the town forest perspective. Interestingly enough, when we were out there walking, I ran into a gentleman from Avis. Avis is the Andover Village Improvement Society. And he was actually there as part of the Mystic Link Trail effort. And in the course of our conversation, I asked him what he thought about the cutting, and he said, yeah, it's pretty good. And it looks like it needed to be done. And then his first question was, what are you doing for replanting? So just wanted to clear that's not my obsession only. In his experience, in his area of work, that when you do cut, if you don't do something intentional relatively quickly, then you get something unintentional. And I know that's not Phil Benjamin's opinion, and I guess it's not Chris Pryor's opinion. But this is just another voice,
Sure.
an experienced voice. The concern being that if something isn't done, we will see things grow in, and it's likely to be a lot of invasives. There will be some of the desirable trees, oaks and maples and what have you. We've seen that. Chuck and I went out to the first site was cut way back in phase 1, and there is some desirable growth there. There is an awful lot of undesirable growth. So I know that wasn't part of this project. I'm not suggesting therefore you should have done it as part of this project. It's just another nag.
Well, I appreciate that, really, and we have every intention of doing replanting. Just today, I got, and I copied Chuck on this email, but I got an email from the library saying that for Arbor Day, they want to have a big kind of a townwide event that during which they'll plant 500 trees, and they're asking if it makes sense to do it in the town forest. So, absolutely, that type of thing. As I've mentioned before, the Scouts and Trees for Reading, they've already planted, a couple hundred trees. So, right, and that's. But I mean, I think that's sort of the reality of planting saplings. There are some good years and some bad years. Unfortunately, the year before last would have been awesome because the summer was so wet. Last summer was tough.
But in the end, it's the net replanting growth that counts. It's not an honest effort that was made that didn't succeed. It's what is done to actually get some growth back.
And we intend to do that. But but in addition to that, we view as an extremely high priority, as does Chris Pryor and Phil Benjamin, that invasives are critical. If we don't handle those invasives, and that costs a lot of money, those invasives do. I mean, we spent $44,000 a year ago in November on just doing the trails. We have about $60,000 now. I just sent an email to DCR asking if there is any grant money remaining. And I got a response back saying, yeah, we've got $25,000 left. Now, I don't know if we'll get all of that, but what we are trying to do by asking for that money at town meeting and asking for these grants is to hit these invasives as hard as we possibly can. So, and so that, I think we're all on the same page there. We know how important that is. And then, will do the replanting as, as a part of the effort.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
When we did the original site walk and made the plan, the thought was to leave some 10-foot snags to
Yep.
be habitat.
Yep.
Did that work out well?
You know what? I should have included the pictures of those because there are.
There are many,
Good.
many snacks.
Yes,
Yay,
yes.
thank you.
Next time when I'm gonna add some to it.
I should have mentioned that.
Well-
I forgot.
When it's warm again, I'll go
Thanks for
out and
bringing that
check
up.
them out.
Okay, Chuck, do you have anything you want to say?
Uh,
Since you were this.
Well, I pulled the participants hard about replanting, and they were all cut from the same cloth. That they thought that the undergrowth and the seed bank would take over. And I did go so far as to ask them to join me to walk over to the council ring where Phil Benjamin said he actually cut that in a different way. And the way he cut it, it wouldn't promote growth. So I know that I'm not sure how many more years we're gonna do invasive removal out there. This is Bill's project. Bill's great. He's getting the money, he's getting the work done. As long as the invasive removal keeps happening at like a $60,000-$80,000 level each year, or somewhere in that neighborhood, I think we can keep up with this in phases. But I did say at the last town forest meeting that I think that it would be cheaper to plant. And maybe, when the conservation's hope, I said, it's not just us, it's every conservation commission I've ever run into, conservation person I talked to. Remove the invasives and plant. That's step one and step two. The town forest committee has just added a step where they're gonna take care of the invasives, but at any time you can replant. I think there was another opportunity that we heard about. I don't know if you followed up on it. But Chris had said that his colleague was giving out boxes of like 50 saplings or something like that. And we were both gonna make a phone call. I haven't contacted them but to ask, and I said, if I got them, I would donate them to the town forest. But as it happens every year, the problem is watering.
Yeah.
So we can plant a bunch of this stuff and see what happens, but.
So let me ask Bill a question. When I was a Boy Scout, which wasn't yesterday, we've had backpacks that essentially was a whole container of water. And there was a hose on it, and theoretically you had a certain number of people carrying those. And it was in case there was an issue with the campfire.
Sure.
Do they still have those? Is that still a thing?
The town has one.
Just one? Well, I'm just thinking if there were.
You're talking about two separate things.
If there were a handful, then it's more likely that you could keep some number of.
He's
trees.
talking about a backpack.
No, I am. That's the one that would be issued with the key to the town forest, is I forget what they call it, but,
Well, if you have one, it's called torture.
right. So.
Are you gonna water the whole town forest with that?
No, I mean, what I was thinking is if there were some of those, maybe you could get some Boy Scouts to take on not only planting, but then maintaining them.
Well, I think a super secret, like, don't tell anyone, but I think the town DPW was watering some of these places for them. But since then, I've heard from Ian Nelson that he knew that their plants that they had planted really suffered out there, and he was looking into getting something that could be like something to transport water if they ever did this again. So,
They did water them a couple of times. The scouts did go out earlier in the summer.
Yeah.
But then it just got so dry.
It
was a tough summer.
That's why the lot 5, we had a plan to spend $2,000 on plants and plant that section above the retaining wall. And then all of a sudden someone said, oh yeah, you're gonna have to water it. And, we asked the DPW and they were like, no, we can't do that for you. And so we couldn't do the project until, I think the town, trails, maybe we should have come up at the land use summit. Like, it would be great for someone to have some sort of watering tank that we could all use, because I don't think we can't ask the DPW every time to water these things, but I have a truck, I can, if it could handle it, I could bring it out there, and I know that I've seen other town employees use DPW trucks. And so maybe that would be something that we could all pitch in with our budget request to get something on wheels to get out and water some of these things,
Because planting is great. It's a good first step. If they don't make it, it didn't do anything but spend money.
The DPW has a truck with a tank full of water on it that they use to water some of the traffic island kind of things. But I know that's not something that they have the time to do, but the tank exists. And I don't know if it's permanently affixed to the truck or not, but I was gallon pouring water on my traffic island and they came up with this big tank with a hose and they watered across the street from me and were
I have
gone.
a question that's not really conservation related, but.
I think you should put a
pictures of
C-click
people on
fix
the
in to use that water tank. I don't know if it's gonna be. I would rather get our own, so we don't have to worry about telling someone we broke it. And we would only rely on. Like, I don't know, I don't think it's that heavy. Maybe even a regular old car with a hitch on it could pull it out there.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, it has to be commensurate with what gets planted. If you're going to go plant acres, I don't know how you're gonna water that. So it has to be kind of a focused effort. You plant X number in a certain area, and then it's a chance though it could be watered. And obviously it would depend on what's.
I don't know how they're gonna do the town forest, but certainly it would help, I think.
It would help.
I think that the scouts were eager to do it. I mean, but they didn't have anything.
Well,
If you could drive the tank along the fire roads, you could at least water
Right.
next to the fire
A
roads.
lot of their trees were near the fire roads.
Yep.
The one going down to the Miro building off to the side there, so.
It's just a thought, but yeah, water is the limiting factor when you're planting and the weather has a lot to do with it when it's how many acres are out there in the town forest? I mean, there's just too many.
Yeah.
You gotta get to the far end. That's where the scouts planted, way up far end.
Okay, anything else have to do with this topic?
So I think the point of Bill coming tonight is he wanted to know if the commission is ready to close out, to accept the work that he's done and to close out and give their approval on the work that's been done at the town forest, for phase 4. So that would be a vote. So you might ask for.
Was phase 4 required to do replanting and invasive, or is just the cutting?
Just the cutting.
Okay, I move that we accept that the cutting has been done properly.
Acceptably. May second?
I'll second, I just have to wait for my.
Yeah, I just couldn't tell if he froze or not. Okay,
No, he's not. He's not frozen
I
there.
couldn't tell.
Walter?
So
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Walter Talbot's in favor.
Tony Rodolakis in favor.
Martha Moore in favor?
Brian Moore in favor.
All right.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Bill, for coming and
Thank you.
showing that that presentation. But how many times I see it? Like 4?
Probably. Thank you for your patience.
There's one at the land use summit.
Yeah, I think it was. And it was at their meeting and yeah.
But that's a good idea about the snags.
Good.
Thank you. I'll definitely have, I took a bunch of pictures of it.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Now, can you take over while we're trying to get enforcement of the DPW Stroud Dam water fountain? I'll just go into this one. So the next item on the agenda is the enforcement order for the Reading DPW Stroud Ave water fountain. I want to let you know that Mike Kessman is not here tonight, and the reason why he's not here to talk about this is because he has completed his notice of intent application. I received it today. And he will be at our next meeting to present a notice of intent as the commission requested in their enforcement order for this water fountain. Okay, so he's, in my opinion, he's in compliance and we just, we'll see this at the next meeting.
And no action required tonight.
No action required tonight. We're just an update to say that he's complied. I have the notice of intent in my hands,
Okay.
be published tomorrow.
Then violation notices.
Yes,
If there are no violation notices, do you want to take over again? Are you?
I have finished my side.
Okay, I'll hand the reins back to the chief.
I think we wanted to talk about 445 Pearl.
Are you on it later on? No, it isn't there.
So, at the last meeting, Martha and I gave an update on our meeting with the Rivers at their property. And the outcome of that was they were going to prepare a plan for a proposal to keep the retaining wall as it is, with some justifications for that. Chuck, have they sent you anything? Okay.
I have not received anything, for the record, I have not received anything from Michael Rivers or anyone at that.
I don't think they were gonna propose keeping the retaining wall exactly the way it was, but
True.
modifying
Right.
the original plan for reconstructing the stream.
You are correct. Sorry.
Okay. I think they had hoped to have it in time for this meeting, but I think they certainly should have it in by the next meeting, and we should be prepared to do something further at that point. Or was I wrong? Were they hoping to have it in on the 8th?
Jack said he could have it in, but anyway, you're gonna say something, Chuck.
Yeah, it seems unusual to allow two homeowners that have a background in construction and photography to design a stream. How did you feel confident enough to allow them to even take a stab at it?
That's interesting. So their point was that they thought the way the plan was approved would be a problem with the bottom because it had changed so much since it was originally approved. So their argument was they did the wall to help deal with the current situation as opposed to what it was when the plan was approved. And we were kind of going round and round. They suggested that they could propose a plan change. And we said,
We couldn't approve it, it would have to go to the whole
They said,
commission if they wanted to do
send
that.
your proposal in and we'll deal with it according to due process. But there is a currently approved plan in place for how to handle that stream.
Hmm.
So this is not saying I'm confident that they can do it. I think it was worth a couple weeks for them to.
Yeah, I mean,
propose
because what they did was a far cry from the approved plan, which was pretty obvious.
something. Unquestionably true, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I think it was, I think maybe the desire wasn't there to do it that way because they would lose
Parking space.
parking spot.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I remember pictures and going out there on the site visit, there was only about hardly a car's width next to the garage.
You mean originally?
Yeah.
Yeah, originally it was very small, then it got built up then, which was part of the problem. Remember, he had like gravel kind of cover and he had his pickup parked there. When we were on this visit, he said that he has parked his boat there for a long time, whatever that is. I don't remember, I've seen a boat there, but then I wasn't looking. So I do think it is likely we end up saying, nope, the approved plan, it just seemed like in the interest of getting them to move forward, let them, if they want to put the time and effort into proposing a plan change, we can at least consider it. Because considering it doesn't tie us to agreeing to it.
And
Yeah,
we
I
were
think it's
just-
been way too long.
It's
As
been a long, long
Brian
time.
says, we were going round and round. We were we were not making any progress in convincing the homeowner to take out what he'd done and put in the correct
Well, in fact,
construction.
Jack did most of the talking.
Yeah.
So at this point, we can give another extension, yet another in a long line of extensions, or we can take the next step and consider fines. This is already under an enforcement order.
Yeah, I think we should send this to town council if the commission doesn't, and I know the town is probably not gonna be happy with that, but seems to be bigger than the commission can get this resident to do. I think there's a lot of damage out there, damage that continues. DEP probably won't step in.
So what's the process of sending it to the town council? What happens then?
Well, they'll write a letter, and I would expect that they would write a letter that would tell them in no uncertain terms to provide a plan, but it's coming from the town's lawyer,
Yeah, so it's a little bit
Yeah.
stronger.
Yeah, and I think,
and get the work done.
I think the deadline for the plan to be approved needs to be February 12th, that they need to get the paperwork into you in time to come to the February 12th meeting.
So is your assumption that we could review it in situ one time and approve it? Or delay
Yeah.
it?
Either approve or reject. We already have an appropriate plan that he came to us with 3-4 years ago. 4 years ago.
It doesn't seem like we should do both a commission extension and go to town council. I think we should do one or the other. I like the idea of going to town council. Basically, it's an escalation.
Yeah.
Without going to fines.
Right, and I think the town council should be the one who says you need to come to the commission either with a plan to do the work as approved or with your proposal of how you want to modify that plan and have that discussion on February 12th. And if they don't show up on February 12th, then we start fining them for not compliance.
So by the
That
time we
makes sense.
get to that point, it'd be what, 6 years?
Yeah, I just think we're gonna send it to town council and see what they say.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Lost control of it. Not that we want to have any control of it, it's just gonna be up to however they decide to take it.
Do you have any thoughts, Tony?
No, I haven't been to the site yet.
Walter, do you have any thoughts on this?
I've only listened to you folks, so no.
You guys are missing out.
Do you have any photos from the site?
We don't need them.
Okay.
We don't. So at this point, I think we should ask Chuck to involve town council.
No. Well, did you tell them they were supposed to be here tonight? Do they know that?
No, we didn't tell them to be here tonight. We said plan tonight. Which meant they would have submitted. it.
So tell Chuck to send another letter out with some instructions to show up at the next meeting, or we're gonna defer this matter to town council. So,
We can tell Chuck that.
Okay.
and
So
so
moved.
town council is just gonna ask me, what have you sent them?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna have to show this escalation of enforcement orders,
Right.
and
And they have.
so I just don't want them
Right.
to say, well, how did they know they weren't supposed, how did they know it's supposed to go?
So having the last break in the
Yeah.
draft makes sense.
Okay, so I move that Chuck send one more letter to say that they
Update the
really have
enforcement
to
order.
come,
Update the enforcement order to,
either come on the 12th with their date that they're gonna start construction on the original plan or their other plan for us to approve. Right?
Yeah.
I'll send it to chairs to review.
Okay. Next, DPW monthly meeting, February.
Wait,
4th.
Martha moved.
Oh,
We need a second.
Also can second.
Walter Talbot's in favor.
Can you
you
second
need
it
to
first?
second it.
Oh, I thought I heard Tony second it, sorry. I'll second it
Thank
and
you.
I'll approve it.
Tony Rodolakis in favor.
Martha Moore in favor.
Right, go in favor. Out of control.
DPW meeting,
DPW, February 4th,
same day as this select board meeting.
that meeting.
Maybe, I don't know.
Anything like that.
Are you gonna be around?
I'm checking. Right.
That's Tuesday.
So, so the Tuesday before is going to be the deadline for any items on your agenda. We make an agenda now, so anything you
That's
come
right.
up with. So I think you should be able to see what's happening in town.
So yes, I can make it, but I need to leave at 1:45. I'll put important things first.
Yeah. Agenda items due the week before.
Okay.
I do have a conflict that day, but I could figure it out if you need me there.
I mean,
Brian's gonna be there for 45 minutes.
we
You know,
rarely go longer than that, although we did last week, but we rarely do, so. If you can,
yeah, Mike really put together a long agenda. I was like, geez.
I can rearrange my other thing, but I could leave early. I just need to figure out.
They want to end it at
How to zoom in.
1:45, make it for you too?
yeah, can you make it that long?
My conflict is noon to 2. I could leave early and only go to my other event from noon to 1 and then
Why
zoom
don't you,
in
why don't you
at
skip it
1.
and Brian will go.
And we'll
if you-
just make
If
it
you can make it and you feel like doing extra, and it's Brian's there for 45 minutes, it's probably good. That's enough.
It should be enough.
But add to the agenda if you see things around town or you're like, I want to ask these questions.
Okay, and so the agenda deadline for that DPW meeting is the 28th of January.
Okay. Minutes for approval.
I didn't receive any minutes.
I didn't write mine
That's
yet.
what I didn't write mine. yet.
Okay, so
So
there's
that's
no
great.
minutes.
No minutes to approve. And Tony has graciously offered to do this one.
Do I
Wait,
need
Joe,
the
sure.
sign-in sheet from the previous one in order to put all those names of that huge crowd that came at the top of the meeting?
Yeah,
Or do I
why don't
only
I
have
just
to put
scan
in
it
the
and send
people
it
who
to you
spoke?
tomorrow?
Okay,
Yeah.
that would be fine.
Right.
So I should put all of those on the list. Up at the top.
Okay. Is there anything else we should discuss before we lose two sleep?
Failing to lose us.
Anything else? Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn at 9:25?
I move to adjourn at 9:25.
Second, anybody?
This is Tony, I second.
All in favor?
All right, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
See you later, Walt.